The arrival. The prelude arrived as a subtle tremor, a low thrum of anticipation that resonated up through the Hoover Building's foundations. The lone journalist, perched precariously on a street lamp like some carrion bird, first flagged the anomaly rippling along Pennsylvania Avenue. Soon, colleagues joined, their lenses swiveling, focusing on a distant locust that ballooned with alarming speed. Murmurs escalated into shouts, then coalesced into a unified roar. "He's here! It's him!" The announcement detonated within the FBI, a shockwave jolting the normally subdued atmosphere. Agents froze, conversations sputtering out, and an undercurrent of barely suppressed anxiety electrified the corridors, reminiscent of a live crime scene. Director Robert Ray, his face a roadmap of bureaucratic skirmishes won and lost, was immersed in a particularly soporific report on cyber threats behind his imposing desk. He cultivated an image of unflappability, a bastion of calm amidst turbulence, but the insistent buzz of the intercom, followed by his assistant's near-hysterical tone, threatened to fracture even his carefully constructed composure. "Director, this is critical. You have to see this now." Ray scowled, fingers tapping a restless tattoo on the polished wood. "See what, Martha? I'm in the middle of—" "It's him. He's actually here, that I in person." "He who?" "Oh, for crying out loud, what is it this time?" He knew exactly to whom she alluded. The previous administration had been a persistent migraine, a cacophony of rash judgments and public declarations that typically left the FBI scrambling. But at least there was distance. This felt different. Ray stood, his movements deliberate, each footfall measured, as though traversing a frozen lake. That he went to the window, squinting at the spectacle unfolding below. Pennsylvania Avenue had morphed into a bizarre spectacle. News trucks jostled for position, their satellite dishes gleaming like predatory eyes under the afternoon glared a multitude of faces, a mosaic of bewilderment, indignation, and feverish excitement, pressed against the barriers. And at its core, like an opulent vessel navigating a tumultuous sea, was the motorcade. Onyx SUVs, gleaming and imposing, formed a protective bulwark around the unmistakable presidential limousine, the Beast. The atmosphere hummed with barely leashed engine power. The screech of tires, the strident wail of horns at IT was a carefully orchestrated display to seize attention, to intimidate, to herald the arrival of one who considered himself beyond the pale that a cold fist clenched in Ray's gut. This defied protocol. This was far from ordinary. This was Trump. He turned to Martha, who hovered in the doorway, visibly shaken. "How? Why? Were we notified?" Martha shook her head, her voice reduced to a thread of sound. "Nothing, sir." Complete surprise, the Secret Service simply appeared. Ray cursed under his breath, a rare breach of his professional demeanor. The absence of communication, the sheer temerity of the act, was enraging. IT betrayed a blatant disregard for the FBI's autonomy, the careful balance of authority. He adjusted his tie, inhaled deeply, and willed himself to regain control. He was the director of the FBI, and he couldn't afford to lose his nerve, to betray any hint of weakness. That he had a responsibility to safeguard the Bureau, to uphold the law, irrespective of how unorthodox the circumstances. "All right, Martha, alert the security detail that I want a comprehensive briefing within 5 minutes, and determine what he wants." As Martha hurried away, Ray returned to the window, his gaze locked on the approaching convoy. He felt the weight of precedent bearing down on him, the crushing burden of his office. The FBI had weathered storms before, confronted challenges to its jurisdiction, but this carried a different weight. This felt like a deliberate test, a gauntlet thrown. The procession halted directly before the building. The doors of the Beast swung open, and he emerged. Donald Trump. He paused, reveling in the spotlight, his signature smile plastered across his face. He surveyed the scene, his eyes raking the crowd, acknowledging the cheers, seemingly indifferent to the jeers. He looked triumphant. Ray watched, his heart hammering against his ribs, as Trump began to stride toward the entrance, his gait brimming with confidence. Bordering on a swagger, he was a raw force, a confluence of mayhem and charisma. The doors to the FBI headquarters parted, and Donald Trump entered. The ensuing silence was almost palpable. The agents massed in the lobby stood transfixed, their faces displaying an array of shock and disbelief. The sole sounds were the clicking of cameras and the muffled cries of the press outside. Trump paused just inside, his eyes sweeping over the assembled personnel. He seemed to drink in the attention, to thrive on the energy in the air. Then his gaze locked onto a single point, on Director Robert Ray. He grinned, a broad, unsettling grin that sent a wave of unease down Ray's spine. And then he spoke, his voice resonating through the hushed foyer. "Hello, Bob. Splendid to see you. Figured I'd pop in." The words hung, heavy with veiled intent, an implicit foreshadowing of events to unfold. Ray summoned a polite smile, his mind whirling, attempting to anticipate the next maneuver in this surreal, unprecedented scenario. He knew, with chilling certainty, that whatever Trump was plotting, it boded ill. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. President, this is unexpected. What brings you here today?" Trump ignored his hand, instead delivering a hearty clap on Ray's shoulder, a gesture both familiar and vaguely menacing. "Don't fret, Bob. Just want to chat, man to man, about a few salient matters." He paused, his eyes glittering with amusement. Matters pertaining to the future of our great nation. And with that, Donald Trump, against all odds and despite all protocol, had entered FBI headquarters, and the world held its breath, waiting to see what would transpire. The meeting. The fluorescent lights of the J. Edgar Hoover building hummed, a monotonous drone against the rising tide of anxiety in the conference room. Robert Ray sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, the wood gleaming under the harsh light. He felt the weight of the bureau pressing down on him, a physical manifestation of the responsibility he carried. Across from him, Donald Trump radiated an almost unsettling cheerfulness. His tie, a vibrant crimson, seemed to pulse with an energy that clashed violently with the sterile environment. "Bob," Trump began, his voice booming, filling the room. "Good to see you, really, truly good." He punctuated the statement with a wide, almost predatory grin that did little to reassure Ray. Flanking Trump were two men in impeccably tailored suits, their faces as blank and unreadable as government-issue concrete. Alan Dershowitz sat to Trump's left, his brow furrowed, seemingly lost in thought. To Ray's right sat Isabella Diaz, her gaze fixed on Trump with an intensity that bordered on defiance. She gripped a pen so tightly her knuckles were white. Ray knew Izzy. He knew her unwavering dedication, her sharp mind, and her fierce protectiveness of the Bureau. He could practically feel the anger radiating off her in waves. "Mr. President," Ray replied, his voice measured, careful. "Thank you for coming. Though, as I mentioned on the phone, this visit was unexpected." Trump waved a dismissive hand. "Details, Bob. Details that we're here now, and that's what matters. I'm here to offer the FBI something you've never had before. Complete and total cooperation." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Izzy Diaz visibly stiffened. Ray felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. He had anticipated many things, but this was a masterclass in audacity. "Cooperation, Mr. President," Ray echoed, carefully keeping the disbelief from his voice. "With all due respect, your administration's relationship with the Bureau was often perceived as strained." Trump chuckled, a loud, almost grating sound. "Strained? Bob, you wound me. That I just wanted to make sure you guys were doing your jobs, holding people accountable, draining the swamp, as they say, that a little nudge here and there, that's all." He winked, a gesture that felt more like a threat. Dershowitz shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "Mr. President, perhaps we should frame this in terms of moving forward, a fresh start, if you will." Trump ignored him. That he leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Ray's. "Look, Bob, let's be honest. The country's a mess, a total disaster. And you know who's responsible? The deep state, the radical left, the people who are trying to destroy our great nation." He paused for effect, his eyes scanning the room, lingering on Izzy for a moment. I'm here to help you clean it up. To give you the resources, the authority to finally expose these traitors. Izzy Diaz spoke, her voice cutting through the tense silence. With all due respect, Mr. President, the FBI operates independently. That we follow the evidence, wherever it leads. Trump turned his attention to her, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Evidence is manipulated, fabricated. You need to see the bigger picture, Agent. Diaz is it. He consulted a small card he pulled from his pocket. You need to understand who the real enemies are. Our enemies are those who break the law, Mr. President. Izzy retorted, her voice unwavering, regardless of their political affiliation. Ray held up a hand, silencing her. He knew Izzy was right, but he also knew that engaging in a direct confrontation with Trump would be unproductive, potentially disastrous. Mr. President, Ray said, turning back to Trump, while we appreciate your offer, the FBI has established protocols and procedures that we adhere to. That we cannot simply target individuals based on unsubstantiated claims. Trump slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. Unsubstantiated? Bob, I'm telling you, these people are dangerous. They're undermining our democracy. And you're sitting here playing by the rules while the country burns. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I came here in good faith, Bob. I came here to offer you a lifeline. But if you're too blind to see what's happening, then I can't help you. He turned to Dershowitz. Alan, let's go. I have more important things to do than waste my time with people who don't want to be saved. As Trump strode towards the door, Dershowitz offered a small, apologetic smile to Ray before hurrying to catch up. The two men in suits followed, their expressions still blank, unreadable. The silence that descended after they left was thick, heavy with unspoken words and unanswered questions. Izzy Diaz stared at the closed door, her jaw tight. Ray leaned back in his chair, the weight on his shoulders feeling heavier than ever. He had a feeling this was only the beginning. The briefcase. Trump's grin widened, a manic gleam lighting his eyes. Now, Robert, he said, clapping Ray on the shoulder, the force of it almost knocking the director off balance. For the grand finale, the piece de resistance, as the French say. He gestured towards a young, nervous-looking Secret Service agent who was hovering near the doorway. With a visible gulp, the agent stepped forward, carrying a gleaming, silver briefcase. It was small, almost dainty, compared to the man holding it. The agent placed it gingerly on Ray's already cluttered desk. The briefcase sat there, reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the office. It was locked. Two small latches securing its contents, and no visible keyhole. Just smooth, unblemished metal. What is this, Mr. President? Ray asked, his voice tight. He hadn't moved from his chair. He hadn't even blinked. Beside him, Diaz remained an unreadable statue. Evidence, Robert. Exonerating evidence. The kind that will make the fake news media choke on their virtue signaling lattes. Trump's voice boomed, filling the room. This, my friend, proves everything. Deep state conspiracy, the rigged election, the whole shebang. Ray steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on the briefcase. Evidence of what, specifically? Everything, it's all in there. Names, dates, times, the whole enchilada. But it's sensitive stuff, Robert. Very, very sensitive. Needs to be handled with care. Trump circled the desk, like a predator assessing its prey. That's why I'm giving it to you. Complete cooperation, remember? Dershowitz, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. With all due respect, Mr. President, simply handing over a locked briefcase doesn't constitute complete cooperation. We need to know what we're dealing with. Trump waved a dismissive hand. Details, Alan, details. Trust me, you'll be singing a different tune once you see what's inside. This will blow the lid off the whole damn thing. Ray felt a headache brewing behind his eyes. This was precisely the kind of situation he dreaded, a theatrical gesture, dripping with vague promises and potential legal landmines. Mr. President, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I appreciate the gesture. However, we can't simply open this briefcase without understanding the context of its contents. and, frankly, without some assurances. Assurances? What kind of assurances? Trump bristled, his jovial facade cracking. A waiver, Mr. President, Wray stated matter-of-factly. A signed waiver acknowledging that you are voluntarily providing this briefcase, that you understand the FBI will be conducting a full investigation into its contents, and that you release the FBI from any liability regarding the use or disclosure of the information contained within. Trump scoffed. A waiver? You think I'm stupid, Robert? You're trying to trap me. Not at all, Mr. President, but it's standard procedure. The IT protects you as much as it protects the Bureau. Wray held his gaze, unwavering. Without it, we can't proceed. The briefcase stays locked. A tense silence descended upon the room. Trump paced back and forth, muttering under his breath. Dershowitz watched him with an almost clinical interest. Diaz remained impassive, her eyes fixed on the briefcase. Finally, Trump stopped pacing. He looked directly at Wray. His eyes narrowed. Fine, he spat. Fine. Get me your damn waiver. Wray nodded to Diaz, who swiftly produced a document from her own briefcase. It was concise, legally sound, and precisely worded. She handed it to Trump, along with a pen. Trump scanned the document quickly, his brow furrowed, but he seemed to be searching for some hidden clause, some subtle trap. Dershowitz leaned in, offering quiet counsel. After a moment, Trump tossed the document back onto the desk. Give me the pen, he growled. Diaz handed him the pen. Trump gripped it tightly, his knuckles white. He hesitated for a moment, then with a flourish, signed his name across the bottom of the waiver. The signature was bold, almost aggressive. He slammed the pen down on the desk. There, he said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Happy now, Robert? You got your damn waiver. Now open the damn briefcase. Wray picked up the signed waiver, and he examined it carefully, then nodded to Diaz. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the only sound besides the heavy breathing of the Secret Service agent by the door. Wray felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had a feeling that whatever was inside that silver briefcase, it wasn't going to be good. The music box. The combination lock gave way with a muted click, almost a sigh. Despite the frigid air conditioning, a cold drop traced a path down Wray's temple. He'd steeled himself for incriminating papers, even cleverly fabricated ones. He'd braced for accusations, rebuttals, a media frenzy orchestrated before a single document surfaced. This, though, was beyond the realm of expectation. Cradled in time-worn velvet inside the briefcase was a relic, an antique music box that would possess a deep, sable hue, adorned with mother-of-pearl inlays, their edges softened by the passage of years. It was preposterous, absurd, a letdown so complete it felt like a deliberate jest. Trump's unnerving joviality bloomed, magnified tenfold. Well, Director, what are your thoughts? A tad unexpected, wouldn't you agree? He dipped a hand into the briefcase, surprisingly deft fingers grazing the wood's aged surface. Wray's jaw clenched. He could feel Izzy's watchful gaze, Cole's almost tangible apprehension. Mr. President, he began, his tone carefully measured, I confess I'm at a loss. But comprehension will dawn. Director, it will. Haste spoils the savor, wouldn't you say? Besides, where lies the delight in immediate gratification? Trump's smile broadened, a fleeting glimpse of teeth within. With a flourish, he lifted the music box, cradling it as one might a priceless artifact, which, Wray conceded, was entirely possible. With your kind indulgence, Trump inquired, his eyes sparkling with playful mischief. It was not a genuine request. Before Wray could voice a response, Trump began winding the key at its side. A subtle, mechanical drone arose, the sound of ancient gears reluctantly stirring to life. Izzy subtly shifted stance, her hand hovering near her sidearm. A wordless warning to Cole, barely registering it. His gaze remained riveted on the music box. A knot of anxiety tightening in his gut. He'd witnessed enough oddities to know that innocuous-seeming objects often harbored the greatest potential for harm. The whirring amplified, then terminated abruptly. A hushed expectancy hung in the air. Then, the music commenced. It wasn't the sugary, tinkling tune one might associate with a music box. This was altogether different. The notes were somber, filled with lament, played on something akin to a miniature, mournful calliope. The melody was haunting, almost dissonant, fractured chords that seemed to insinuate themselves into the listener's psyche. Izzy furrowed her brow, her mind struggling to classify the sound. Unsettling, certainly, but also familiar. Vaguely so, like a forgotten nursery rhyme recalled in a feverish dream, a chill prickled Cole's spine. The melody resonated with a buried disquiet, a sense of regret and loss he usually kept suppressed deep within. He forced himself to analyze the music objectively, but it was like attempting to dissect a feeling, an emotion. Trump stood motionless, his eyes closed, a look of serene contentment on his face. The music seemed to envelop him, transforming his bombastic persona into something almost beatific. A creeping dread washed over Ray. This wasn't a distraction. It wasn't jest. This was something else entirely. Something meticulously calculated. The waiver he'd compelled Trump to sign now seemed woefully insufficient. He had inadvertently opened a Pandora's box, and he now faced the unknown horrors about to be unleashed. The melody persisted, weaving its enchantment, filling the chamber with an atmosphere of suffocating sadness. It was a sound that seemed to tap into some primal fear, some collective memory of sorrow and deprivation. Izzy, unable to endure the silence a moment longer, spoke, her voice taut. "Mr. President, what is this? The meaning of this charade?" Trump opened his eyes, his smile now a fixed expression. "Meaning? Agent Diaz? Oh, everything possesses meaning, wouldn't you concur? It's all about the narrative, the story we choose to believe, and this," he indicated the music box, "merely marks the commencement of our story." He paused, allowing the melody to wash over them again. "This, my acquaintances, is the linchpin." Cole frowned. "The linchpin to what, precisely?" Trump chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent tremors through Cole. "Patience, Agent Cole. All revelations will come in time. You see, everyone labors under the delusion of understanding the truth. Everyone believes they grasp the underlying realities. But the truth, my friends, is vastly more intricate, infinitely more beautiful." The music box carried on, its haunting cadence filling the room with an unsettling loveliness. Ray felt ensnared, caught in a web spun by Trump. He had willingly walked into it, enticed by the prospect of answers, only to confront something far more unnerving than he could have anticipated. The exonerating evidence he'd sought had morphed into a discordant symphony of doubt and trepidation. Hallucinations. The melody coiled, a crystalline serpent sinking its fangs into their very essence. Diaz gasped, the gilded cage of Trump's office momentarily dissolving into a fractured mosaic. She found herself staring at a grotesque parody of Quantico's evidence room. Shelves listing precariously, drowning the space in menacing shadows. "No," she choked, the word a fragile bird escaping her throat. Then she saw it, lurking in a forgotten corner that logic swore didn't exist, an aged metal strongbox, labeled in faded script, Operation Nightingale. The Bureau's long unsolved art theft case, the one plagued by vanished evidence. Her breath caught. This couldn't be happening. She stumbled forward, hand outstretched, a coppery taste blooming on her tongue. The box felt real, undeniably present. Her trembling fingers fumbled for the latch. Inside, cradled by threadbare velvet, lay the missing Degas sketch, the prize that had eluded them for years. Tears stung her eyes. This was it. Vindication, a resolution she'd only dreamt of. But as her fingertips grazed the cold metal, shadows surged, becoming predatory tendrils. The distorted evidence room groaned, threatening to buckle. Before her horrified gaze, the Degas sketch crumbled into dust, scattering on a non-existent breeze. "No, please no," she shrieked, her plea swallowed by the discordant music and the room's phantom laments. The vision shattered, leaving her breathless and adrift back in Trump's garish office. The haunting tune clinging like cobwebs. Beside her, Cole stood ramrod straight. His features a mask of abject terror. He teetered, his gaze vacant. The opulent surroundings had receded, replaced by the sterile glare of a claustrophobic interrogation cell. He was younger, sharper, his face bearing the ghost of a past decision. Across the scarred table sat a quivering figure, a sniveling informant named Benny the Weasel Fazio, his eyes bulging with panic. Benny held the key to a sprawling racketeering network, but he was also a liability, a weasel true to his name. Just say it was him, Cole, his superior had pressed, the words hanging heavy with unspoken implications. A little encouragement saves us time and trouble. The music box's refrain intensified, twisting the memory into a vice. Cole recalled the slickness of his palms, the lead weight in his stomach. He'd looked at Benny, at the raw fear etched on his face, and felt a repugnant blend of emotions. Disgust, perhaps even a sliver of pity. He remembered the words he'd uttered, the carefully constructed lies that cast Benny as the puppet master. He recalled the fleeting surge of triumph as the case closed, the accolades showered upon him. But that ephemeral satisfaction had curdled into a corrosive guilt that refused to dissipate. Now, reliving this nightmare, he saw Benny's face twisted in silent condemnation. The room contracted, the walls threatening to suffocate him. "You knew," Benny howled, his voice reverberating within the suffocating space. "You knew I was lying. You destroyed me." Cole flinched, raising his hands in futile defense. The crushing weight of his past transgression threatened to bury him. He gasped for air that tasted of phantom regret, the music box's melody a relentless battering ram against his skull. Back in Trump's office, their collective hallucination was eroding the agent's professional facades. Diaz, still reeling, blundered into a marble table, sending a crystal vase hurtling to its doom. Cole, ashen and trembling, clutched the arm of a chair for support. The other agents exhibited similar signs of breakdown. Miller stared vacantly at a gaudy yacht painting, her eyes reflecting an unsettling, childlike innocence. Davies paced erratically, his hand instinctively inching towards his sidearm. Director Ray watched, aghast, as his team fractured, their sanity unraveling with each spectral note that he struggled to maintain a semblance of control, fighting his own creeping unease. The air hung thick and heavy, pregnant with unseen dread that he felt the music box, probing his mind, seeking chinks in his armor. Trump, however, remained aloof, his eyes alight with a disconcerting amusement. Seemingly untouched by the swirling chaos, he surveyed the scene with smug satisfaction, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Quite a spectacle, wouldn't you say, Director?" he purred, his voice dripping with chilling mirth. "Just a little perspective, don't you agree?" The revelation. Trump's grin stretched wide, an unsettling display against the oppressive quiet that descended after the music box's initial flourish. "Intriguing, wouldn't you agree? It has a knack for unlocking, let's just say, certain doors." He pointed to the ornate box, its mother-of-pearl inlay gleaming under the conference room's harsh lights. A little friend whispered that it possesses unique attributes quite conducive to truth-telling. A cold dread seized Ray, twisting his gut. Truth, from Trump, a maestro of misdirection and outright falsehoods. He schooled his features. "Mr. President, with all due respect, what precisely are you implying this contraption is achieving?" Trump's chuckle, a gravelly rumble, scraped against Ray's sanity. "Implying? No, Robert, I'm illuminating the creeping decay, the Kabbalistic designs, the forces undermining our nation." His gaze roved over Diaz and Cole, lingering on Cole with a predator's focus. Diaz, still reeling from the jarring visions, resisted the box's influence. Fragments of recollections, artistic disappointments, yearnings never acted upon, clung to her. She felt the siren call, the insidious persuasion that this device held some answer, some absolution. But instinct screamed foul play, that it was all a fabrication. Cole, however, remained frozen. The melody hadn't stirred some sleeping muse within him. It had resurrected Danny's ghost, the snitch he'd betrayed. Danny stood before him, pleading for justice. Cole could almost taste the phantom scent of cheap whiskey and stale tobacco that permeated Danny's presence. Color drained from his face, a film of perspiration slicking his brow. The memory, so intensely vivid, threatened to drown him. He clutched the table, knuckles bone-white. Ray, detecting the fracturing of his team, knew decisive action was imperative. Enough, he declared, his tone crisp and commanding. This is counterproductive, that we need to terminate this immediately. He reached to silence the box, that Trump's hand, surprisingly swift, blocked him. Careful, Robert, that wouldn't want to disrupt the process now, would we? Veracity is fragile. His grip possessed unexpected strength, his eyes burning with near-fanatical zeal. The sole fragility here is this investigation's integrity, Ray countered, attempting to wrest his hand away. Which are jeopardizing. As Ray wrestled with Trump, the music swelled anew, a grating cacophony boring into their skulls. The room seemed to waver, reality's edges dissolving. Diaz felt a renewed surge of disorientation, disjointed memories fusing into a single, overwhelming panorama. Her renowned artist, her canvases ablaze with vibrant, breathtaking creations that a life forfeited. The resentment bit deep. Cole, imprisoned by his past, barely registered the scuffle that Danny's visage loomed, condemning, begging, crushing. Guilt threatened to suffocate him. Confession clawed at his throat, words jammed by fear. Finally breaking free, Ray lunged, and as his fingers grazed the cold surface, he caught it. A subtle flicker in Trump's gaze, not of triumph, but of anticipation. Like a gambler watching the roulette wheel, the sickening realization dawned. This had nothing to do with uncovering a supposed deep state. This was about something far more malevolent. That he stalled, his hand poised above the box. What was Trump's ultimate aim, and what devastation would follow if he ended the music? Would the visions dissipate or escalate, amplified by the sudden stillness? The melody throbbed, contorting into a grotesque echo of itself. Diaz gasped, clutching her head. The mirage of her accomplished life crumbled, replaced by a vision of her, isolated and bereft, her talent squandered, her potential unfulfilled. Cole emitted a strangled sob, collapsing into his seat. I did it, he whispered, his voice ragged. I framed him, that I framed Danny. Trump observed them, his expression inscrutable. The truth, he breathed, a low, contented murmur. It invariably surfaces. Ray knew, with bone-chilling certainty, that he was walking into a carefully laid trap. The music box wasn't revealing truth, it was warping it, weaponizing the deepest regrets and frailties of its listeners. And he, director Robert Ray, had unknowingly enabled it. He had to shut it down. But how? The consequences of silence were a terrifying unknown. The room felt charged, a coiled spring ready to snap. The defiance. Isabella, Izzy, Diaz fixed her gaze on the buzzing fluorescence above the conference table, their discordant drone a grating contrast to the phantom melody still resonating within her. Not the music box's tune itself. She had mentally purged that, but the images it had unlocked. Vanished files, suppressed evidence, injustice. Raw and stinging, that Cole's shattered confession stood as a chilling validation of the box's unsettling power. She observed Ray. The stark light carved deep lines into his face, aging him before her eyes. That he was ensnared, caught between the reckless impulses of an ex-president and the Bureau's core principles. Yet, principles alone wouldn't conjure the missing documents. They offered no solace against the ominous premonition that she was teetering on the edge of something monstrous, a darkness beyond Trump's usual theatrics. Her vision hadn't revealed the precise location of the information, just the suffocating conviction of its existence and critical importance. They were interred, concealed with purpose. But by whom? And for what nefarious purpose? These questions gnawed at her, demanding resolution. Ray was correct. They couldn't blindly follow Trump's lead. But what if, amid Trump's characteristic distortion, a genuine concern existed? What if, buried beneath his manipulative facade, lay a kernel of truth that could expose a credible menace? The debate roiled inside her, a silent tempest mirroring the room's fraught atmosphere. Ray remained tethered by caution. And Cole. Cole was a write-off. Someone needed to take action. The decision solidified, firm and unyielding. She had to see for herself, retrieve the files. "Excuse me," she announced, her voice strained. "I need to verify something pertaining to the Cole investigation." She avoided Ray's gaze, a guilty pang pricking her. IT wasn't a complete fabrication. The Cole situation was a direct result of Trump's machinations. Ray barely acknowledged her, still wrestling with Cole and the disturbing ramifications of his admission. He offered a distracted nod. "Very well, Diaz. Keep me abreast." It was all the encouragement she required. Izzy stood, her motions measured, a careful facade concealing the urgent energy coursing through her. She gathered her belongings, the familiar weight of her Glock, a comforting presence in the face of the unknown. Reaching the door, she hesitated, glancing back. "Director," she said, her voice more resolute than she felt. "I believe in this bureau. I believe in what we represent. I refuse to let that be compromised." A pledge both to him and to herself. Then she vanished, consumed by the featureless corridors of FBI headquarters. The outside air was sharp and invigorating, a welcome shift from the stale atmosphere within. Izzy tightened her coat, the collar shielding her face as she hurried toward the parking structure. She moved with intent, her mind already dissecting the fragments of her vision, seeking a pattern, a link, anything to guide her. She understood her actions were impulsive, perhaps even reckless. But the alternative, remaining inert, awaiting Trump's next gambit, was untenable. Inside her car, she retrieved her phone and established a secure connection. Access to the Bureau's archive case files was essential, particularly those associated with individuals who might have interacted with Cole, individuals who might have profited from his indiscretions. While the data populated, she checked the rearview mirror, a sudden flicker of unease raising the hairs on her neck. Was she under observation? Was this yet another layer of Trump's game? Or was she simply succumbing to paranoia's grip? She pushed the thought aside, refocusing on the imminent task. The truth resided out there, entombed beneath layers of deceit, and she was committed to exhuming it, regardless of the personal cost. Back in the conference room, Robert Ray stared at the empty space where Diaz had recently stood. Her pronouncement echoed. "I believe in this bureau. I believe in what we stand for." Words he desperately craved to hear. Yet, they also amplified his growing apprehension. He knew Diaz, a capable agent, fiercely devoted, but also strong-willed, inclined to act on gut feelings. And those instincts, fueled by the music box's unsettling visions, threatened to lead her astray. He reached for his phone, his thumb poised over Diaz's direct line. He should call her. Order her to stand down, await further instruction. But he faltered, knowing she would likely disregard him. And he couldn't risk a direct confrontation. Not now. He lowered the device, a chilling dread settling in his gut. He was losing his grip. Trump's scheme, whatever its final objective, was tearing at the Bureau's carefully constructed framework. He had entered the meeting seeking clarity, seeking a path to limit the damage. Instead, he had unleashed something far more treacherous. He glanced toward Cole, still slumped in his chair, his face buried, a broken man, testament to the ruinous power of secrets and manipulation. Ray understood the urgency for action, but he was enmeshed, ensnared in a web of lies and political maneuvering. He had to find a means to expose Trump, safeguard the Bureau, and extricate Diaz from the looming shadows before it was too late to salvage anything. The standoff. Ray stood ramrod straight, the knot in his gut twisting tighter with each tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Trump, unervingly jovial, lingered by the table's edge, his fingers almost caressing the gilded cage of the music box. Animosity hung thick in the air, a silent battle waged with narrowed eyes and clenched fists. "Director," Trump purred, his voice a silken thread. "I believed we shared a common goal." "Why this aggressive stance?" He indicated the quintet of agents flanking Ray, their faces masks of resolve barely concealing their unease. Swallowing hard, Ray forced the words out. "Mr. President, securing the artifact for comprehensive evaluation is standard procedure. Nothing more." The justification tasted like ash in his mouth. A mirthless chuckle escaped Trump's lips. "Evaluation? I've divulged all there is to know. It's merely a trinket, a purveyor of pleasant melodies." "Relax, Robert, you're paler than a ghost." The agent stirred, hands edging towards holsters. Behind Ray, Marcus Cole felt icy perspiration bloom on his forehead. The music box's faint, persistent chime wormed its way into his inner ear. Magnifying his apprehension, he spotted the tremor of uncertainty in Ray's gaze, and a fierce protectiveness ignited within him. This farce ended now. "Mr. President," Cole cut in, his tone surprisingly resolute. "This isn't a request, but a necessity. The music box must be taken into custody." Trump's smile evaporated, replaced by an arctic stare. "Are you issuing a threat, Agent?" "Cole, isn't it?" His gaze flickered to the two silent sentinels behind him, their tailored suits hinting at concealed weaponry. "We are retrieving evidence," Cole amended. The air solidified. Ray raised a placating hand. "Agent Cole, restrain yourself." But Cole remained unmoved. The hallucinations, the persistent sense of dread, the classified documents he had glimpsed, they converged into the unwavering certainty that this music box was far more than an artifact. It was a carefully concealed weapon, and Trump wielded it with insidious intent. Before Ray could reiterate his command, Cole acted. He surged forward, reaching for the object of contention. Instantaneously, Trump's protectors responded that a behemoth of a man with a shaved skull moved too. Intercept Cole, becoming an unyielding barrier. The other moved to safeguard the music box. Pandemonium erupted. The conference room, usually a sanctuary of sterile meetings, devolved into a maelstrom of flying fists and shouted commands. Agents struggled to contain Trump's detail while safeguarding themselves. Ray looked on, aghast, his authority disintegrating before his very eyes. Cole grappled with his larger opponent, his training taking over despite the surge of adrenaline. He managed to connect a punch to the man's jaw. But the security agent remained unfazed. The second agent, the music box clutched tightly in his grip, found himself besieged by two determined FBI agents. They fought to wrest the object from his possession. The ornate artifact became a nexus, a coveted prize demanding sacrifice. Amidst the chaos, the music box slipped from the agent's sweating palm. Crashing onto the unforgiving mahogany surface, IT bounced once, then again, before plummeting to the floor with a sickening crack that a collective intake of breath echoed through the room. The delicate machinery within the music box protested violently under the impact. The haunting melody, a constant undercurrent to the tense atmosphere, faltered, sputtered, and ceased with a final, agonizing shriek. Silence descended, absolute and oppressive. Cole, momentarily disengaged, stared at the wreckage on the floor that a wave of vertigo washed over him. The visions that had tormented him for days seemed to dissipate, leaving him strangely vacant. Trump surveyed the scene with glacial composure. "A regrettable incident," he remarked, his voice devoid of genuine concern. "It appears your little inquiry has reached a discordant conclusion." He turned to Ray, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling light. "Perhaps now, Director, we can resume a more fruitful dialogue." The evidence. The air in the conference room hung thick with the aftermath of Cole's outburst. The silence was a suffocating blanket, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of a medical monitor attached to the slumped figure of Agent Cole. Trump, ever the performer, surveyed the scene with an unsettling cheerfulness, his gaze lingering on the shattered remains of the music box. Then, the doors swung open with a dramatic flourish, shattering the tableau. "Agent Isabella," Izzy Diaz stood silhouetted in the doorway. Her face flushed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. In her hands, she clutched a thick manila envelope. Every head swiveled. Ray's expression was a complex blend of relief and apprehension. Trump merely smirked, as if expecting this interruption all along. Diaz, Ray began, his voice strained. Where have you been? And what is that? Izzy ignored him, her eyes fixed on the table. She strode forward, the click of her heels echoing in the suddenly hushed room. She slammed the envelope onto the polished surface, scattering pens and notepads. This, she announced, her voice trembling with barely contained energy, is what you've been looking for. What you've been told doesn't exist. Alan Dershowitz, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, leaned forward, his keen eyes glinting with interest. He reached for the envelope with an air of academic curiosity. Careful, Alan, Trump cautioned, a hint of amusement in his voice. You wouldn't want to contaminate the evidence, would you? Dershowitz ignored the jibe, carefully extracting the contents of the envelope. That it was a collection of documents, printouts, handwritten notes, and what appeared to be scanned images. He quickly scanned the material, his brow furrowing in concentration. These appear to be... He began, then paused, looking up at Diaz. Agent Diaz, are you aware that these documents corroborate Mr. Trump's claim regarding the timeline of the Mar-a-Lago documents? A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ray paled visibly. He snatched the documents from Dershowitz's hand, his eyes darting across the pages. The color drained from his face. This can't be, he muttered, his voice barely audible. This was suppressed. The documents detailed a series of internal communications within the National Archives, explicitly acknowledging the delays in processing the documents requested by Trump's team. They painted a picture of bureaucratic inertia and miscommunication, not a deliberate attempt to obstruct the investigation. Trump chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the room. Suppressed, Director? By whom, I wonder? Perhaps some deep state actors who wanted to make me look bad. He spread his hands, feigning innocence. I'm just trying to cooperate here, folks. Diaz met Ray's gaze, her eyes burning with righteous anger. These were filed away, Director, marked irrelevant. I found them in a sub-basement archive, misfiled. Someone didn't want them to see the light of day. The implications were staggering. That if these documents were genuine, and a preliminary analysis suggested they were, they significantly undermined the core narrative of the investigation. That Trump's defense, previously considered a flimsy attempt at deflection, suddenly gained considerable weight. Dershowitz cleared his throat, breaking the stunned silence. Director Ray, with all due respect, these documents warrant immediate and thorough investigation. Their existence and their alleged suppression raises serious questions about the integrity of this entire process. Ray looked from Diaz to the documents, then back to Trump, who was now radiating an almost palpable sense of triumph. The weight of his position seemed to crush him. He felt like a puppet with tangled strings, manipulated by forces he couldn't comprehend. Agent Diaz, he said, his voice flat, I need to see you in my office now. As Diaz followed Ray out of the room, she glanced back at Trump. He caught her eye and offered a slow, deliberate wink. A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't just about the documents. This was about something far more insidious, something that reached far beyond the confines of the FBI headquarters. The room remained in a state of suspended animation. Dershowitz continued to examine the documents, his brow furrowed in thought. Trump paced slowly, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The destruction of the music box had not diminished his power. It had, in some perverse way, amplified it. He had turned the tables, exposing the vulnerabilities within the Bureau, and he was just getting started. The aftermath. Trump radiated triumph, a living embodiment of vindication. Well, Robert, he boomed, clapping Ray on the shoulder with disconcerting joviality, a truly productive visit. Wouldn't you agree? Tremendous cooperation. Beneath the presidential bonhomie, Ray felt the crushing weight of his position. He offered a tight, professional smile. Indeed, Mr. President. The press corps, A hungry pack baying for scraps surged forward, their lenses glinting and microphones extended like accusing fingers. Trump, the consummate performer, basked in their attention that he released a concise, meticulously crafted statement. Assurances of transparency, pledges to drain the swamp, vague pronouncements about exposing the deep state. Not a word about the music box. The discord he'd unleashed within the FBI's core. He simply waved, a figure of ambiguous victory, and disappeared into the plush interior of his limousine. The motorcade's departure left a silence hanging so thick it could have been sculpted. Diaz, her face still burning, gripped the envelope containing the documents like a lifeline. Cole sat stiffly, a battleground of suppressed feelings etched upon his face. Ray simply stared out, lost in the city's intricate sprawl. What now? Diaz breathed, her voice fragile. Cole raked a hand through his hair, a gesture born of profound frustration. I don't know. Everything we believed, it's all inverted. A keen sense of culpability stabbed at him. His outburst, catalyzed by the music box, had inadvertently paved the way for this debacle. Ray turned, a map of exhaustion drawn across his features. We delved deeper, he stated, his voice resolute despite the inner chaos. We dissect everything. Diaz's documents, the original probe, the music box itself. But Director, Diaz countered, how can we trust anything? How can we be certain we aren't puppets in a larger game? Precisely the question, Ray replied, a grim edge sharpening his tone. We must be better, more exacting, impartial, even when the truth stings. The air crackled with unspoken fears. The ramifications of Diaz's findings were seismic. If Trump's timeline aligned with reality, if those documents were genuine, someone within the Bureau, or perhaps above, had deliberately suppressed evidence to frame him. But who stood to gain? Purely political maneuvering, or something far more malevolent simmering beneath the surface? Cole pushed himself up, squaring his shoulders. I'll begin by confirming the veracity of these documents. Agent Diaz, I have contacts within the archives who can expedite the process. His voice held a surprising steadiness, masking his inner turmoil. Diaz nodded, relief washing over her. I'll re-examine the original evidence, seeking any overlooked details or misinterpretations. It was a reach, but she had to act. The thought of Trump escaping unscathed, potentially having played them all, was abhorrent. Ray observed them, his expression inscrutable. He knew this was the mere prelude. The investigations were fragmented, trust eroded, and the future a murky expanse. He had to find a path through this treacherous terrain, safeguard the FBI from further politicization, and unearth the truth. No matter how unsettling, he crossed his desk, picked up the phone, and punched in a number. Give me Agent Sterling, he commanded, his voice urgent and hushed. I require complete psychological evaluations. Agent Cole, Agent Diaz, and myself. He replaced the receiver, his gaze fixated on the corner where the music box rested. IT sat there, seemingly innocuous, a beautiful artifact of polished wood and burnished brass. Yet he knew with a bone-deep certainty it was anything but harmless. IT was a weapon, a tool of influence, and he had no idea how to neutralize it. The music box's true essence, its origins, its intended effect, remained shrouded in mystery. Was it merely a sophisticated psychological ploy, or something far more insidious? Did Trump truly grasp its potential, or was he merely another piece on a much larger chessboard? As twilight descended, casting elongated shadows across the room, Ray experienced a profound sense of unease. Ensnared in a labyrinth of deceit, he lacked a clear path to escape. The FBI, the institution that defined his life, teetered on the precipice, and he, Robert Ray, was the sole individual capable of saving it, or destroying it utterly. The weight of that choice pressed down on him, almost unbearable.